Kick and YouTube. Let's see. I'm gonna do a multi-stream. I hope everything goes all right. Okay, we are live and we are live. Okay. Well, great. I'm gonna explain what we're gonna do today. I should have started earlier. I had the idea of starting like at 6 p.m. and now are 8 p.m. Uh, I'm kind of tired now, right? It's like there were 2 hours of dealing. Long story short, there were 2 hours of trying my mic to work, getting my mic to work, because my hub doesn't recognize it. So I had to search for a cable and a couple of things more. Yeah, whatever. But everything is all right. I'm gonna explain rapidly, very fast, what I'm gonna do today. I just realized that my graphic table doesn't work. Damn it. Gosh darn it. Dude. What? Okay. I guess this thing doesn't work either. Oh my god. Oh, well, my keyboard is not working really well lately. It has trouble connecting. This is all because of the hub. Okay, like everything was working perfectly, and all of a sudden my microphone is not connected to the hub. Hub doesn't recognize the microphone, and it's impossible to connect it. So annoying, man. So annoying. Like, oh, and it seems this other cable that I found is power output only, so I think this won't work. Yep. I guess we won't have a graphic table to use Figma today. And the keyboard doesn't work. Oh my god, nothing works. Why one does nothing works, man? Nothing works in my life. Uh, I'm gonna explain very briefly what I'm gonna do in this stream. It's gonna be a short stream. I don't wanna waste anyone's time. Let's see. I wanna see the chat, and I wanna see the chat. Show me the chat. Show me the chat. Silence. Oh my god. I'm having more complications than expected. Okay, this should be enough. Well, what are we gonna do today? We are going to try and start the development of a TCG game that I want to make. And let's see what happens. I have no expectations. I'm gonna see all these videos. I'm gonna take notes on these videos. I'm gonna try and read the rules for Magic and Shuyo and Mitos y Leyendas, and essentially try and piece together like a group of rule sets, a rule set for my incoming game. Hey, Fox the Brown, welcome, guy. Welcome, my guy. If I sound a little nasal, it's because I'm a very nasal guy. I'm gonna try and explain. I'm Argentinian, and here in Argentina we have this magazine that explains different card games, and I'm gonna try and read a little bit and take that, like, the main ideas of the time. Is from the early 2000s. I have digitalized them, all the collection, most of the collection, like, and let's just get to it. Since I don't have my graphical tablet, I'm going to be writing with pen and paper, just so everybody knows.
Doesn't matter how it happened or in what stage of the game it happened in, losing a game to nothing more than random chance is going to be frustrating. And yet, card games are a genre of game where randomness is central to the overall gameplay experience, and somehow we still love playing it. It's not like we're hurting for options here. There are plenty of non-random games we could be playing instead, like chess, and buying a chess set is probably going to be cheaper than buying into a TCG. So for this video, I figured I'd dig a little bit deeper than my usual introductory videos look past one specific TCG and more at a general game concept here, and that is...
I'm gonna watch this whole series. That is kind of short, you know, like it's it looks like many videos, but there are like 6 minutes, 8 minutes each. So for the next 4 or 5 days, I'm gonna watch a couple videos each day, and I'm gonna take like the main ideas and bring them down to a rule set for my upcoming game. That's the general idea.
Is randomness in TCGs. For a working definition, I'll define randomness as any factor which will affect the outcome or progression of a game that does not involve human input or decisions, and that can be input on the player side or input on the game designer side. I'll also be looking at Rebirth for You a little bit more specifically, videos, since it's a game that really got me thinking about this topic. Randomness is very central to that game's overall experience, and understanding the role of randomness goes a long way to understanding what Rebirth for You is trying to accomplish as a game. Randomness presents itself in TCGs in a bunch of different ways. The most obvious random element, though, is the one that happens right at the very start of the game, which is when you shuffle your deck. Shuffling means that the cards begin in a random order, which means the player is going to gain access to their game pieces in a random order as well. Different games are going to mitigate this randomness in different ways and to different extents, and how I go about choosing to do this is going to be a defining factor in what gives that game its own unique individual flavor. However, the most important way that a player is able to mitigate the randomness of drawing from a shuffled deck is an option that all TCGs give the player, which is that the player decides what goes into that deck in the first place. If there's a specific card they want to draw, they can include more copies to increase their odds of drawing it, and if there's a card they don't particularly want to draw, they can play fewer copies or just not put that card in their deck to start with. Once the player has decided what to include in their deck, games will then also assist the player create their opening hand. Most games have some kind of mulligan rule, and beyond this, some games will let the player begin the game with guaranteed access to certain cards. This can be a specific list of starting cards, like in the quite old and also quite dead game Magi Nation. It can be an extra deck, like is found in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the Lyric deck in Wicross. Or it can be by allowing the player to freely choose.
Okay. You have a starting list that is the main deck, an extra deck, and a chosen card. Those are three good. Making a TCG from scratch, zero experience, zero resources, zero talent, nothing. Let's learn together. That's right. I have zero experience. You are in the same. We are in the same boat. Hey, Boots beats master. What's up, my dude? Great. We are gonna watch all these videos and take like the main ideas. I have like a lot of resources here. I'm gonna be streaming like 2 hours and like trying to bring down a rule set for my upcoming game. So let's learn.
Starting cards from within their deck, like your starting.
Okay. Probably I'm gonna have like an extra deck. I don't know if I wanna have a chosen card. A chosen card is when you have like a captain, like a big guy that you can put in the field if you have the resources. I don't know if I want to have a chosen card, but I'm most probably gonna have an extra deck. I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh guy. I love Yu-Gi-Oh. I have played Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, this game that is Mitos y Leyendas. I have played a Pokemon card game also. I have played card games for all my life.
Character in Rebirth
So
for you,
I feel
or
pretty
taken to an
prepared for
extreme, it can
this,
be just freely choosing your entire starting hand, like in Ashes: Rise of the Phoenixborn. Some games will also give the player access to a limited number of guaranteed resources, like in ZX, where you begin the game with these resources, or in the digital TCG Hearthstone, which takes up the player's resources at the start of each of their turns. Mulligans, starting cards, and guaranteed resources all help the player reduce the
Shamino.
randomness of their initial draw and give them more control over how they begin the game. Every TCG is going to do this in some way or another, and there is a very good reason for this. You don't want bad luck to effectively end the game before players have had the chance to make even a single play. Past the initial turn, however, there's a lot of mechanics that can decrease randomness over the course of gameplay. First is the number of cards drawn each turn. In some games, you only draw one card at the start of your turn. In some games...
Okay. Draw per turn. Model effects. Okay.
That's 2 cards. In some games will give you 3 cards per turn, and some will even go past that, like Keyforge, which lets you draw back up to 6 cards no matter how many cards you started that turn with. Some games will also make it relatively easy to add additional draws to your turn through card effects, and some will make you work quite a bit harder to add more cards to your hand. No matter what, the more cards you have in your hand, the more options you have available, and the less likely the game is going to come down to randomness. Another, slightly less obvious way of reducing randomness over the course of the game is in modal effects. This is where the same card can be used for different effects depending on the game state. The most obvious example is modal spells or effects, which is just a list of options. The player can choose option A, option B, or option C as they play that card.
Okay. I really like this idea of the scaling effect. I'm most probably gonna use like not a mana system. I don't like mana. It's like this very limited mechanic. I wanna use like a temporal mechanic, like mana, but each turn you get more, like Hearthstone. I believe Hearthstone is a. Thank you, man. Thank you for passing by, Boots. I'm gonna use the scaling effect, and
However, there's also scaling effects, which is
I'm gonna use a scaling effect because I want the effects to have like a power level. I really don't like this idea of having like this big monster, this incredible monster that you have put all these resources to put in the camp, in the field, and some fucking dude just sorry, I shouldn't say that word. And some dude comes out and says, no, I counter that with a counter that I don't know, uses like 3 mana, right? That really doesn't sit right to me. So like a scaling effect, if you have a big monster, you're gonna need to use a lot of resources. Hey, I have guys in Kick. What's up, guys? Sorry for ignoring you. It's not my idea. What's up, Shaxmodo? What's up, my dude? Sorry. Let's put this back together. Yeah. What you telling me? Sure, dude. Yeah. You follow me, I follow you. Sure. Okay. So that's one of the main ideas I have. Like a big monster needs a big spell to be taken down. You are not supposed to like so disproportionately be able to counter like a big move like that, you know?
Is where a player
So
can spend
scaling
a small
effects,
number of resources.
big point. Scaling effects. Scaling effects.
Early in the game to play a weaker effect, or save that card until later in the game when they can put more resources into it and make a much more powerful, impactful play. Some games will even bake modality into their game rules. Games like Lacrosse and Duel Masters let the player use cards in their hand as resources, which not only smooths out the randomness present in their resource development, but it also gives the player something to do with cards that may not be useful to them at the given moment. Again here, different games will have different allowances for how much randomness is allowed to play a role in how that game develops. Although, it is worth noting that all games are going to be random to some extent because they're all dealing from that same shuffled deck. A final source of randomness in card games is in random card effects. This isn't just the Pokemon coin flip attacks though, although those certainly are random, but they include any effect that activates at a random time and can generate a substantially more powerful effect than the game's resource engine would otherwise allow at that point. These are often baked into games as catch-up mechanics to make sure that the losing player is never too far behind when their opponent pulls ahead, or they can simply be included to add more drama to the game. Examples will range from effects that trigger when the player is damaged, like Life Bursts in Macross or Ignition cards in ZX, to cards that can cancel damage.
I like the idea of random trigger because it's gonna run entirely on PC. I don't like coin flips or that sort of stuff. I do like the idea of having like a percentage, like a possibility of something happening each turn or whatever. So I'm probably use random. So when you have random effects, you could have like a deck entirely made around the idea of random events, you know, and it's gonna be such a thrill. I believe it's gonna be pretty fun playing with the mechanic random trigger, you know.
Damage during an attack, like climaxes in Wise Shorts, or heal triggers in Vanguard, to effects that will actually help the attacking player push in more damage, like critical triggers in Vanguard and soul icons in Wise Shorts.
Damage prevention or boosting.
They help the attacking player push in more damage, like critical triggers in Vanguard and soul icons in Wise Shorts.
Oh, so it's like a dice roll for the action. Damage prevention or boosting, like that's okay. That's okay. I'm gonna do that. Let's say right, dice roll. A dice roll. Yeah. 4 actions, 4 attacks. Yeah.
Actually help the attacking player push in more damage, like critical triggers in Vanguard and soul icons in Wise Shorts. All of these different levels and types of randomness present in games can make it a bit disorienting when moving from one game to another. If you're starting Lacrosse after being used to Magic, it can be a bit surprising just to see how many options there are for adding more cards to your hand, and how easy it is to keep a relatively wide range of options even into the later game. In Magic, if you lost your entire hand by the third turn, that's pretty much game over right there, whereas in Lacrosse, if you've lost your entire hand by the third turn, chances are that's just going to be an inconvenience and you'll still be able to play out the game. Moving in the opposite direction is definitely weird as well. Rebirth
Vuela, se gira al atacar. Okay.
for you is a great example of this because it is quite a bit more random than most other TCGs. The starting hand size is very small, it's only 3 cards, and you don't get any mulligan to modify this starting hand. You only draw 1 card per turn, and the nature of the entry in mechanic coupled with spark effects means that a lot of the most powerful and impactful plays made over the course of the game are going to happen at random times and ignore the player's resources almost entirely. As an example, imagine you have 6 energy and your entire field has just been wiped. You flip over your first entry in completely randomly, and for one example, consider it is a 3 cost. You pay 3 to move it back, flip over another 3 cost card, move that back, and then you flip over a 1 cost card. Now you're stuck with the 1 cost card's rather lackluster stat line, and you only have 2 attacks with it. Meanwhile, consider another possible scenario where you flip over a 1 cost card into your entry. You pay 1, move it back, flip over another 1 cost card. Pay 1 to move that back, you flip over another 1 cost card, you pay 1 to move that back, and then you flip over a 5 cost card. Now you've got a full member zone, which means you get the maximum number of possible attacks. You have a 5 cost card in your entry, which means you get a much more powerful set of stats to attack and defend with, and you also have enough resources left over to make one of your attacks a partner attack, which is overall going to make your attack phase a lot more.
I didn't understand that at all. But also, I kinda don't care. Didn't seem so interesting to me.
More effective. Both of these scenarios can happen to the exact same deck, and it's not like deck building will really get you out of this. All decks are going to need to play some combination of these high cost and low cost cards, and how they end up getting flipped is ultimately just going to come down to how the cards ended up positioned in your deck after shuffling. The fact that so much of the game is going to come down to the position of cards in the deck after shuffling rather than player decisions means that the game itself can sometimes feel a bit random, which is not great when you've put 10, 15, 20 minutes of gameplay into it, and probably even more time than that into building your deck in the first place. Normally at the end of putting in all this time, you would hope the result doesn't feel like you should have just flipped a coin and called it a day. Which brings me to the question that prompted this video in the first place, which is, why do we like playing these games with high amounts of randomness? Why are games designed that feature this high amounts of randomness? And in a more roundabout way, why are we choosing these games when there are non-random games available? Again, like chess. That's beside the obvious reason. Randomness can definitely be a big source of frustration in card games. There are a few things quite as frustrating in card games as playing to the best of your ability, making no obvious mistakes, and still losing, especially when your opponent was making tons of sloppy plays and making several obvious mistakes that you were never able to capitalize on because randomness ended up just costing you the game before you were able to take advantage of it. All this can leave you feeling like your skill in the game and the time and effort you put in to hone that skill is simply not being rewarded. Bad luck can hit at any point of the game as well. It can hit you right at the start of the game, where perhaps you drew a poor opening hand and after mulliganing it only got worse. It can hit you in the middle of the game, where after playing a decent couple of turns in the early game, you suddenly start drawing brick after brick while your opponent somehow manages to draw exactly the card they need for several turns in a row. Or it can hit at the end of the game when you're moving in for your final attack, the opponent manages to flip a lucky heal trigger to cancel the damage, and then on their next turn, they move in for their final attack and you flip no heal triggers at all, meaning a game that you thought you were winning suddenly turned into a game where you just immediately lost. All of these situations are definitely frustrating, and all of them are a direct result of randomness present in card games. But randomness has some good sides as well. One of the big advantages of randomness is that it's random. This lends a ton of variety into how the game plays out. Even if 2 players with the exact same deck play against each other for 100 games in a row, no 2 games are going to be quite the same. Not only is this going to be good for novice players, since they can always blame their loss on variance and bad luck, but it's good for the experienced players as well. It forces them to constantly be thinking on the fly about the best possible plays with the cards they have available to them at the moment. It's not simply a memorization of play patterns, but it is a constant need to adapt, improvise, and overcome the opponent. Now, one could argue that chess manages the same combination of adaptation and learning without all of the randomness involved. Which brings me to the next advantage of randomness, and that it helps break up asymmetry. Chess has 6 unique game pieces, and each player starts with the same pieces in every game. On the other hand, TCGs are defined by massive card libraries, often reaching into the thousands or even tens of thousands of unique game pieces to choose from. Naturally, some cards and archetypes are going to end up being more powerful than others here. Randomness will help reduce the gap between the most powerful strategies and the more niche strategies. A player who spends all of their time and money chasing down all of the cards to build their perfect waifu deck is still going to have a chance against a player who spends all of their time and money chasing down the most established, tournament-topping meta deck that they found online. The player who has only $20 to spend on their deck might still be able to squeak out a win against a player who dropped $500 into their deck. Randomness helps these fringe and lower budget strategies compete with the meta decks, which not only helps players with these kinds of decks stay competitive and invested in the game, but it also helps the overall diversity of strategies in the game overall. Players can choose these kinds of strategies and still show up to game nights or small tournaments because randomness can help even the field against the meta decks. It doesn't mean that these players who didn't choose to bring a meta deck are going to auto-lose.
Okay. Question of feedback. One of the ideas that I have is that most probably it's not going to be that random per se, like the TCG. it's not going to be that random because like you have a certain amount of energy each turn, and everything that you get should be you should be able to use it. Like there will be not many effects to like that are brick. You know, you do have this has this problem that a lot of effects are dependent on other cards, and that means many times that you even if you have like 3 or 4 cards in your hand on your field, you are not able to do anything good. I'm not gonna allow that. It's boring. It's kind of boring, and I want the game to be played fast. I want it to be a bit more dynamic, you know.
Meta decks will still definitely have an edge,
So everything that you have should be played and used. Maybe it's not of a lot of use, but it's gonna be of some use, you know.
it's not going to be enough to negate the game as it's played. Ultimately, the players are still going to need to play it out to see what the result is. Randomness also cuts down on decision points. The first turn in a game of chess gives you 20 possible opening moves despite only having a total of 16 game pieces. There's quite a lot more game pieces in TCGs, since each deck is going to contain 40, 50, 60, or even 100 cards in the main deck, and even more than that once you start counting in the sideboard or extra decks. Yet, TCGs will often present the player with less options in any given turn than a game of chess. Because there are less options for a player to choose from, it can leave the player feeling like they have less control over the game. But there are still a lot of very important game-impacting decisions for the TCG player to be making, and crucially, having less options in any given turn goes a long way to reducing decision paralysis, which is where a person will freeze up trying to process too many options at once. A final example and advantage of randomness is that it can be used to maintain some amount of uncertainty into the result. While this can allow for the possibility of a sudden random reversal in the result, it also prevents the game from effectively ending while there are still several turns to be played. For the practical demonstration of why this can be frustrating, consider the control archetype in Magic the Gathering, which will
Prevent prevent damage, increase damage, or just random. Okay.
where a person will freeze up trying to process too many options at once. A final example and advantage of randomness is that it can be used to maintain some amount of uncertainty into the result. While this can allow for the possibility of a sudden random reversal in the result, it also prevents the game from effectively ending while there are still several turns to be played. For the practical demonstration of why this can be frustrating, consider the control archetype in Magic the Gathering, which will often have the game locked up well before the game actually ends due to the player's life or library hitting 0. This uncertainty allows for the possibility of a novice player pulling out the rare win against an experienced player, and can keep some amount of drama into the game up until the very last card is flipped. So, considering all of this, both the good points and the bad points of randomness, how much randomness in a game is going to be too much? Not to be disappointing, but the answer is it depends. Randomness is a tool, and how a game designer chooses to use this tool is going to depend a lot on what the purpose of that game is meant to be. If the game's intended to be highly competitive, then less randomness is probably good so that more of the crucial plays come down to player decisions. For a competitive game, they don't want the finals of their top-level competitive pro tournament to come down to who was able to draw a decent hand, and who got heinously unlucky and drew multiple bad hands in a row, eventually being forced to mulligan down to 4 or 5 cards. But if the purpose of your game is more casual, and it's just to let some friends sit down and play out their cool dragon cards or their cute anime girl waifu cards while they're hanging out, then a bit more randomness can actually be a good thing in that game. It can even the field between different decks so that one player isn't constantly winning, it can cut down on the mental load of choosing between large numbers of possible plays, meaning there's less pauses in gameplay, and it can keep an amount of drama and uncertainty in the game all the way through to the end.
Okay, so from this video I get that randomness is pretty useful for what I wanna do. Like my game is gonna be very heavy on big bosses, you know, like big monsters that are going to be expensive and rare and whatever. So what I really wanna do is to what I really want to do is to have a big chance that a guy with a bad deck wins against a guy with a good deck. You know, I like randomness. I'm gonna use it to even the play field. Why? Because you are going to have guys with way stronger decks than the majority of people, you know. And these guys, are going to crush their enemies, their opponents, without even trying because of the strength of their cards. And it's gonna get very frustrating for the guys that are just beginning. So I'm gonna add a level of randomness to attack and defense. Randomness to attack and defense. Randomness to attack and defense. And I want to make it a bit more close to what originally was Shuyo in the first season. That was kind of random. I really like the idea of fields and having like crazy effects that are kind of unpredictable. For example, Shuyo has this problem where the cards have a lot of attributes that are not very useful. Like you have darkness and beast and wind and light and whatever, and none of them actually have an effect on the rest of the cards. Like one will say that if I have a monster that is water and I'm attacking a monster that is fire, I'm going to be doing a bit more damage to him, right? Like I am supposed to damage them a bit more. But that's not the case at all. The real
If you
what it actually happens is that you have most of the attributes of the monsters are just not very important at all. They are entirely ignored for most of the mechanics. So what we are going to do is to make the attributes actually matter. Attributes, dice. We are going to have dice rolls for defense and for attack, so that a very strong monster can win attack or lose, or like win attack or win defense, and it's gonna and the attributes are gonna do something. I don't know. Dice rolls. What else? Random trader. Dice roll from attack. Okay.
feels like every trading card game player has at some point or another put some thought towards designing their own TCG. Maybe it never got past the brainstorming stage. Or maybe,
for example, if you have a very bad deck, you should be able to win against the guy that has a way better deck than you, because you are heavy on the random. You have like a casino run or something like that. And if you have this very random thing, if you're very lucky, you might have a chance to win against a guy that has a fundamentally better deck than you. So very heavy on the uncertainty, basically.
maybe that person actually came up with a basic rule set and a few test cards before they realized what they had just created was an unbalanced, pointlessly convoluted Magic the Gathering clone, and promptly gave up on the whole endeavor. But even though none of my TCG designs really went anywhere, TCG design itself is a topic that has continued to fascinate me. There's a lot of excellent TCGs out there, and a lot of them play quite differently from one another. However, there are a few common elements that seem to keep popping up in TCG after TCG. I've currently found 5 that I can identify, and these elements of design are not just a common thread between TCGs, but they are essential to the design of TCGs as a genre. For this video, we will start with just one of these elements, a life system, or a score system. This system is an incremental measurement of progression towards the game's victory condition. It can be a number that counts up, a number that counts down, or a series of objectives to be taken. This is present in many other card games outside of TCGs, such as cribbage, poker, or bridge. and it's easy to see how important this design element can be by imagining these games without their score system. My first experience with poker ignored the betting aspect, and it had all of the excitement and strategic depth of tic-tac-toe once people figured out that the game always ends in a draw. That being said, plenty of games manage without a life total. Like chess, your king doesn't take damage every time it's put in check. So why is a life system so vitally important for trading card games? Life systems have several benefits. It answers one of the first questions a new player is going to ask. How do I win this game? What is the objective? And, more broadly, what's the game about? How do you win in Netrunner? You collect 7 points worth of agendas, either by advancing them as the corporation, or by stealing them from corporations as...
Clearly, this video was the first one in the series. I've started with this one. There is randomness and okay. 301 and 302. But I feel like there should be like another video before this one. Whatever.
As the runner. How do you win in Magic? Using creatures and spells, you reduce the opponent's life to 0. How do you win in Pokemon? Defeat your opponent's Pokemon and collect prizes. The first to collect all of their prizes wins the game. In each of these games, there's obviously a whole lot more going on than what these victory conditions alone will suggest, but it's still very helpful for new players, especially since the rest of the game can get very complicated.
I really like the idea of the treasure thing.
But it's still very helpful for new players, especially since the rest of the game can get...
I really like the idea of the treasure hunt from Pokemon. It has this value to what I want to do, because it's mainly like a TCG, but for a video game, you know? So if you were able to maybe I guess this is like winning conditions. Winning conditions is getting the life to 0, or stealing these treasures, or doing something else. So winning counts. Conditions. Winning conditions. I'm gonna have I might have a life point system, treasure system, and there is another very good idea that this guy, I guess, is not going to talk about, but the tactical TCGs, where people like try to get a card, or how would you call it? Like in Warhammer. In Warhammer, the idea is to have your soldiers to enter into an area, right? In an area of victory, and you should like put your get your soldiers to that point, and if you get to do that, you win, because you won like a tactical victory. It's not necessary to kill all the other guys or nothing like that. The only objective is to get to a certain point. I don't think I'm gonna do that, but it could be a possibility. Tactical. Okay.
Prizes. The first to collect all of their prizes wins the game. In each of these games, there's obviously a whole lot more going on than what these victory conditions alone will suggest, but it's still very helpful for new players, especially since the rest of the game can get very complicated. It also gives the new player an easy measure of progress to grab onto. High life is safe, and low life is dangerously close to defeat, so they can take some solace in their defeat, knowing that they managed to reduce their opponent to a low life total. They were very close, they just needed maybe another couple turns in order to push in those last couple points of damage. So, if this is good for new players, what about more experienced players? They know that swings in life totals don't actually really matter all that much in determining who wins, that low life can be perfectly safe while high life can still be incredibly dangerous, and that ultimately, losing with the opponent at 2 life is really no different to losing than an opponent with 200 life. At the end of the day, you still lost. The only life that matters to the experienced player is the last one. This is a view that sees life totals not as a measure of victory, but rather as a buffer in how long that player can hold off devoting plays to their own defense. Control deck.
I don't like that. I think it's way better the idea of like keeping your life point as something good, you know? Like you don't want to lose all your life points and just the last one really matters because that means you lose. Um, I don't think that should matter that much. Like it should be more of a prestige thing, you know. Like um, you should have a second, uh, like you have a winning condition, like an end game condition, but then you have another thing that is way more important. That is, sorry, sorry for the noise. Uh, you have something that is way more important. That is um, the style that you show when playing your deck, you know. That should be way more of an incentive to play the thing. So winning conditions, you have this first, and second, way more important, because the second one is going to determine the amount of points that you get, is the amount of turns that you play and the amount of damage that you done minus the amount of damage that you took, something like that, like a point system. Point system. And it should be damage taken minus damage um, inflicted, right? And maybe, I don't know, like amount of resources used, amount of resources used, and maybe, I don't know, like amount of resources used and strongest creature, strongest creature, creature, okay, stronger creature, and maybe rarity of the cards. Like, yeah, that sounds good. Like the rarity of the things that you play. Like crazier, more difficult to summon. Rarity of card played. Card played. The rarity of the card played. Um, that should also, like, yeah. What else? Hmm. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think a bit more in depth in this, but you have a winning condition that is like the condition of the end of the of the match, you know, and then you have a point system, and then you have a point system. That's okay. Mhm. Also, the point system, because I know people are going to try to to abuse the system, you know, and it's like, oh yeah, now let's play together, and I'm gonna summon my best monster, so I have a lot of points, and that's not the idea. The No, yeah, right. The points are credits, and the credits are debited from your opponent in the amount of money put into the thing. Mm, I'm gonna have to think a bit more in depth about this. Um, but it should be for money and for money, like credits, internal credits of the game, and it should be a gamble, like the on stake amount of tokens. On stake amount of tokens. Okay, let's keep going.
And ramp decks, especially, are able to hit their critical mass of reactive cards or resources in play in the face of more aggressive strategies because of the time made available.
Here's when my game kind of differentiates itself from all the other TCG games. The TCG games normally are pretty diverse. Like you have different playing styles. I don't know if I want to be that diverse in my playing styles. I kind of like the idea of all the decks being almost mainly ramp. I like the idea of them being ramp. Uh, the objective is to put like a big monster in place. I kind of don't care about your spells or nothing like that. You should be able to put a big monster and to do big things. Because that's what's fun, right? Like everyone likes Shuyo, and what does everyone like about Shuyo? The 50 plus chain event, first time kill, first turn win. No, no one likes that. Like a nerd likes that, right? But most people, what actually like is it's the anime where you have like Dark Magician and I don't know the White Dragon and all that, right? So it should be oriented to the idea of doing great moves, not so much like small little dumb things, you know. Oh yeah, I have my little monster and I'm going to control your all your moves until I can kill you with like this dude that has a two attack and two defense. No man, you have to do something actually good, you know. Like yeah, I think that I believe that's best. Maybe an aggro, maybe a ramp, maybe a control. Maybe we do have a bit play styles. Maybe we do have a bit more diversity in the kind of effects that the cards have, but maybe this, you know, like uh, some of them are a bit more oriented on ramping up resources to put into one monster, and some of them are a bit more oriented uh, to just put a big monster on the field with a lot of other effects or something like that. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I don't like the idea of control, pure control. It's very boring to me. I just don't like it. So really, if you come to it, uh, like Magic, right? You have Magic, and Magic has. Uh, I would really like to have my graphical tablet for this. Oh, but it doesn't work. Damn. I really thought it was gonna work. It makes me mad. Okay, I'm gonna do this. Uh, Magic, you have fire. You have fire, water. No, you don't have fire or water. You have red. You have white. You have black. You have red again. Yeah, sure. Oh my gosh, just give me magic. Magic thingies. Magic. I don't know, colors. Oh my god, colors, Jesus. Magic the Gathering. Oh, god. Okay. In Magic, you have five colors, right? Um, red is damage, green is ramp, like you want big monsters, you have a lot of damage, you wanna this is to like healing and protective stuff, like you wanna win life. This is for taking life or maybe like losing life for other effects, like damage, ramp, um, winning life, and losing life, but for like some benefit, right? And then you have control. And all the less enjoyable decks to play against, all of them are blue. Insufferable stuff like control and counter, and I don't know, like, yeah, that monster can attack. That that monster, that creature goes back to your hand, and no, I counter it, and it go to this card. Like, Jesus, man, can I play my game, please? Can I use my cards? Thank you. Very annoying stuff. No one likes blue except the people that use blue, but no one likes that people either. Okay, so blue is just not going to be there. Like, there is not going to be blue at all in my game. Control is entirely discarded because its function is to be a retardant of the game. Like, the only objective of control is to extend the time that the for the game to keep going, right? So we're gonna just entirely discard that. I don't like that. That's very boring. Most of the people that are going to be playing the game are not going to like it, and I kind of don't care about the nerds that like like control, so whatever. So you have losing life for benefit, winning life to also last longer, I guess, then ramp and damage. Honestly, like, very honestly, the only thing that really matters to me are these three. Okay, like, very oriented on the idea of like making damage or putting big things in the field. Winning life doesn't make sense, and control doesn't make sense. Why? Because both have as only objective to prolong a game, and you want the games to be fast. You want the games um, to not be a drag. Like, you don't want them to be slow and to not be able to do whatever you want, right? So we are gonna just we are just gonna discard these two modes of play, and most of my cards are going to uh, go around these other three. Uh, they are going to revolve against taking damage for making damage for making damage, and uh, putting big things in the field to make a lot of damage. Everything has an objective, is to make damage, okay? If anything, to put some defense on the field or something like that, but we shall see. So playstyles, it's aggro, ramp, and I don't know how it's called, the black one, the purple one. Let's see how this guy calls it.
By their life total. I mentioned poker without a life total, but what about Magic the Gathering, or Vanguard, or Lacrosse without life totals, where one hit is all it took to end the game? All decks would be forced to play the board from turn 1 just to try and stay alive. Any kind of late game strategy would likely not exist, which would drastically lower the number of playable cards and archetypes within that game. It would force all decks to play in very similar ways, removing a lot of the variety in strategies that makes TCGs so appealing in the first place. In very similar where one poker without a life total, but what about Magic strategies because of the time made available by their life total? I mentioned poker without a life total, but what about Magic the Gathering, or Vanguard, or Wacross without life? The only life that matters to the experienced player is the last one. This is a view that sees life totals not as a measure of victory, but rather as a buffer in how long that player can hold off devoting plays to their own defense. Control decks and ramp decks especially are able to hit their critical mass of reactive cards or resources in play in the face of more aggressive strategies because of the time made available by their life total. I mentioned poker without a life total, but what about Magic the Gathering, or Vanguard, or Wacross without life totals, where one hit is all it took to end the game? All decks would be forced to play the board from turn 1 just to try and stay alive. Any kind of late game strategy would likely not exist, which would drastically lower the number of playable cards and archetypes within that game. It would force all decks to play in very similar ways, removing a lot of the variety in strategies that makes TCGs so appealing in the first place. Now, not to spoil the conclusion of this whole video series on essential TCG elements, but all of these elements are essential because of one
I didn't catch that. Like, he said a lot of things, and I didn't got the point of it. But I'm just gonna assume that it give me the reason.
particularly important reason. They open up huge tracts of design space within the game. TCGs require monstrous numbers of new card designs, created on a near constant basis, and anything that opens up more designs in this space is to be embraced, while anything that dramatically reduces design space is a mortal threat to the game. By using a life total to increase player survivability, the length of time a game takes to complete will be increased as well, which adds more potential turning points to the game and also more clearly defines the early, middle, and late games. Furthermore, as an added bonus, life helps simplify a hugely complex game for newer players by giving them an easy-to-understand objective. For all of these reasons, life systems, or score systems, are essential to trading card games. Whether you're a player trying out a game
One of the things that I'm kind of thinking right now, it's the idea that a game it's defined in like a certain amount of time, like you have 10 turns, 10 turns to do whatever you want to do, right? With your cards. And it's not like the game keeps going until one of them dies. Like, that's a lingering idea that I have, like to do as much damage as possible in the shortest amount of time, just to make the games a bit more playable, like a bit faster. I want the games to be faster. I want that starting a game doesn't mean a half an hour commitment, but a 10-minute commitment at most. And that will be the main point of the point system, like the objective in those 10 turns is not to win, it's not to end the rival. It's more like to do the best you can, assuming that the other player is most probably not going to go down, like to do the best you can and then whatever. That's one lingering idea that I have. I don't think if I'm gonna do that because I do like winning, right? Maybe put like 15 turns, and if you didn't win by 15 turns, like, what the hell, man, right? Like, if you didn't win in 15 turns, then it ends, and like whoever has the more points wins, and that's it. Maybe I'm gonna do that.
Game for the first time, or a game designer trying to design a game from the ground up, you're going to be asking several similar questions. One of the first questions you're probably going to be asking is, how do I win this game? One of the The questions that's going to follow soon after that, however, is going to be, how do I play my cards? How do I take this card I have here in my hand and move it onto the field? Which brings us to the next essential element of trading card game design, resource engines. A resource engine is a system that allows for unequal costs to cards and effects. While it's relatively easy to find examples of life and score systems within other card games, finding examples of resource engines in card games is quite a bit more difficult. It's much easier to look over to board games for examples of these kinds of systems. However, no matter the game, resource systems can be broadly divided into two main types, renewable and consumable. Renewable resources are resources that, once they are used, are only out of commission for one turn, and then they are again available for use. This leads to a very linear ramping up of resources. You get one resource on the first turn, then the second turn you play another resource bringing you up to 2, and then the third turn you've got 3, 4 on turn 4, and so on. The later the game is, the more resources you have available and the more powerful plays you're going to be able to make. A notable subset of renewable resource systems with a slightly different play pattern is fixed renewable resources, like clicks in Netrunner or your normal summon limit in Yu-Gi-Oh! Your resources are renewed each turn, but unlike the first category, they don't increase. You get the same.
This is very important. I believe that a good TCG has a good resource thing, and it's very difficult to pin them out, to like pin a good resource system.
Number of resources to spend each turn of the game.
Magic has this problem where there are games where you just are not able to do anything because you don't get lands, right? And that's totally unacceptable to me. Like, it kind of works in the idea, but I do have the memory. Like, it works 80% of the time, but I do have memories of games where I just didn't get any land, and it's awful. Like, it's very disheartening to be beaten like that.
The second main flavor of resources is consumable resources. These accumulate over multiple turns, but they can only be used once. Once the resource is used, it's gone, it's no longer available. While renewable resources have a built-in natural momentum to the game as your total resources are constantly increasing, consumable resources have a more static natural play pattern. You build up resources, then you spend those resources to try and damage the opponent, and then you're back down to 0 and you have to start the process all over again. While this more static development is definitely a downside of consumable resources, the upside of these systems tends to be that they are much less straightforwardly linear and a lot more flexible. Each resource in a renewable system has a fairly high impact, since that resource can now be used for every turn for the rest of the game, which ultimately limits how many different ways a game can give these resources to the player. However, since adding additional consumable resources has a much lower impact overall, there's a lot more freedom in how to develop these systems. You can get creative in the source of the resources, like using damage as a resource in Vanguard, or defeated units as a resource in Recross. Or you can combine these systems with other resource systems, like in Netrunner that combines a consumable resource in credits with a fixed renewable resource system in clicks. One of the more popular tools to combine with a consumable system is a level system. Leveling up is not a resource in and of itself, but it creates momentum and power scaling as the game progresses. They are much less straightforwardly linear and a lot more flexible. Each resource in a renewable system has a fairly high impact, since that resource can now be used for every turn for the rest of the game, which ultimately limits how many different ways a game can give these resources to the player. However, since adding additional consumable resources has a much lower impact overall, there's a lot more freedom in how to develop these systems. You can get creative in the source of the resources, like using damage as a resource in Vanguard, or defeated units as a resource in Recross. Or you can combine these systems with other resource systems, like in Netrunner that combines a consumable resource in credits with a fixed renewable.
I like this idea. I like this idea. Uh, the idea of burning cards, I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Because how many times you had a card in your hand that you're just not gonna use, like the opportunity to use it is just fly past you. So you just have a dead card in your hand, right? Like, you're never gonna use that. It's entirely useless. uh, well, just burn it, like, use it for energy. It's a resource, like, you should be able to use that card as a resource. I really like that. resource system. Resource system. Fixed, renewable, consumable, that is the one that I like. And there is another one that I don't know if this dude is gonna mention it.
As a resource in Vanguard, or defeated units as a resource in Recross. Or you can combine these systems with other resource systems, like in Netrunner that combines a consumable resource in Credits with a fixed renewable resource system in Click.
Huh. Consumable resource credits, fixed renewable resource clicks. That's pretty cool. I really like that. That's so cool. Yeah. Each turn you get credits. That's great. Each turn you get credits, and if you have a card that you don't need in your hand, you can just sell it. Just sell it. Like you don't really need. And also you could gamble for the credits. Yeah, that's fucking great. That's great, man. Oh my god, that's great. I'm gonna do it. I think I've decided. Credit system. Credit system. Okay, it should have like 4 points. Turn base. Turn base. Selling. Turn base, selling. Also like a prestige thing. I'm thinking about a prestige thing, and that will make sense because you want like a point system, like a good point system, and like putting big monsters in the field, like it will make you more money basically, right? Because you have a big monster in the field and that gets you prestige, and that prestige should give you more resources to do whatever you want basically. And the credit system could be used for whatever you want, like you could burn cards or draw cards or whatever. uh, I don't know. Turn based, selling, um, prestige. Turn based. Prestige. Number turns. And effects, probably like effects. You will have like an effect to get more money, right? Like, yeah. Turn based, selling, prestige, and what else? What else? Hmm. and also and also a gambling. Yeah. Oh yeah, gambling. Oh my god, it's gonna be great. Oh my god, this game is gonna be great.
One of the more popular tools to combine
Oh, it's just
with a
okay.
consumable
Let's
system
finish
is a
the
level
video at
system.
least.
Leveling up is not a resource in and of itself, but it creates momentum and power scaling as the game progresses, similar to what we can find in renewable systems, which can then be combined back in with the build-up payoff pattern of consumable resources, creating a dynamic back and forth momentum. So, why are resources so important to trading card games? In the previous video on life systems, I mentioned how important it was for a game to contain cards that are useful at different stages in gameplay, not only for the gameplay experience itself, but also to create enough different designs to support an expanding game. If a life system is what allows for the possibility of this division of cards into early, mid, late game cards and all the flavors in between, then resources are the practical tool that allows this division to be implemented. Resources allow for power scaling and can give games a sense of momentum, as
Basically, I'm thinking about Balatro. We are most probably have a Balatro kind of run, uh, where the different cards in your deck, um, you will be able to choose from which ones you must desire, and yeah, that's basically it.
your more powerful late game cards outclass the early game cards, while the early game cards hit the ground running and try and give you an early advantage. While this makes sense on an abstract level, one of the easiest ways to see how important resource engines is to take a look at a game that had a very rudimentary resource system when it was first released, and that game is Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh's initial resource system was a simple once per turn normal summon limit, which they attempted to combine with tribute summonings to allow for the possibility of different power levels. However, tribute summonings were never a particularly viable mechanic, even back in the storied days of Summoned Skull Beatdown. As the game continued to release more and more new sets, the game eventually had to MacGyver a way out of this by creating an entirely new resource mechanic,
Please say.
and that led to the creation of the extra deck summoning mechanics. These systems allowed for a far more dynamic use of resources, since the summoning
Oh my
conditions could
god.
be game continued
Mr. Pegasus speaks on the difficulties on the signing for a game with no resource mechanics.
to release more and more new sets, the game eventually had to MacGyver a way out of this by creating an entirely new resource mechanic, and that led to the creation of the extra
Easy to summon, god utility. Many attack points, many card text. God utility. Okay.
deck summoning mechanics. These systems allowed for a far more dynamic use of resources, since the summoning conditions could be made for the early game using relatively easy combinations of components, or they could be biased towards the late game by having more complex summoning requirements on more powerful cards. Without the resource system, there was simply not enough design space to support an expanding game, which goes to
Hmm. Okay.
of the
One of
five
the
essential
big problems that Shuyo had initially is the idea that to summon a monster, a big monster, you kind of have to have a previous good monster. So it didn't really work because the guy that gets to put like a big monster in the field is the one that already has an advantage. And not only that, but you also kind of have to have like um, you also have to have like two monsters that are stronger than the previous, like two monsters have to be in the field that are better than any monster that your opponent can put in the field. Like that's crazy. That's crazy even for Shuya. It didn't really click. It in the actual game, like playing game. Dark Magician, it's basically impossible to, like in 2004, it was impossible to summon it, right? Because uh, back then it didn't have as much support, and you have to have two monster in the field, and you are essentially sacrificing two monster to put just like only a 2,500 monster in the field, right? Didn't really make sense.
Elements of trading card game design, 3 are likely to come up.
Which is such a shame because it's the main monster of the protagonist, right? It should be, it should see play. Like it's this incredibly cool monster with a lot of support, and like no one used it, and it's the coolest of designs. It's incredible.
Before a new player plays their first game. After the questions, how do I win, and how do I play cards, the last obvious question a new player is probably going to ask is, how do our cards interact? Or if you're a normal person, you might just ask, hey, what are those numbers on the bottom of the card? What do they do? Which brings us to the third essential element of trading card game design, rules-based interaction. Rules-based interaction is fairly simple to define. It's interaction between the cards held by different players based on rules. To clarify this a bit, interaction is anything that will affect the other player, either their cards.
Thinking about how I want the random to affect the game, I think it's gonna have like 5 points, like terrain, climate, attribute, um, attribute. How do you call the kind? Kind, archetype, terrain, climate, attribute, kind, archetype, sign. Yeah, I wanted to have a sign. Yeah, that's right. Terrain, climate, attribute, kind, archetype, sign. Uh, each card should have like their special power, like a bit more attack, a bit more defense, something like that, like um, variability, variability, How do you how do you write? Oh my god! Come on, variability. Variability. Okay. Variability. Okay. Like you are going to have a variability for a specific card. And what else? Variability, terrain, climate, review. Special interaction. Special interaction. The special interaction is the things that you could see in like the first season of Shuyo, where, for example, the stone giant, I think it's called, destroys the moon and affects the terrain, right? That sort of like crazy stuff, really crazy stuff. I like to have something like that. It will be pretty cool to have special interactions between cards, different cards, um, with different effects on the game, right? and effects on the point system and stuff like that. I would really like to have this crazy complex, impossible to actually affect, impossible to actually memorize. That's kind of the idea. But terrain, climate, attribute, kind, archetype, sign, and dice roll also. One, two, three, four, five, six, 9. Okay, I have 9 different aspects that give a bit more complexity to any fight between monsters, so that you don't really understand what happens at any point. And that's kind of my idea. The idea is for the people playing the game to never actually truly really understand what is happening. uh, yeah, maybe I should think a bit more about this, because it will be pretty annoying if I have like a 1800 attack monster attacking like a 1700 monster, and mine dies because, I don't know, the rise dice roll, and also, I don't know, the terrain, right? Like, I don't know, terrain. Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, you will be able to see most of the things before you attack. Like, the only really random thing is the dice roll. But variability, terrain, climate, attribute, kind, archetype, sign. I don't know. I'm gonna think about that.
Or their life. And by being rules-based, it excludes any interaction with the opponent that is based on card effects, or text written on the card. It's fairly easy to see in other games, since most traditional card games don't actually have any text on the cards. It's all done through the rules. For example, in Crazy 8, the card you play will then determine which card the opponent is able to play on their next turn. Meanwhile, in poker, players compare the power of their hands, but if you combine 2 cards of the same rank, you get a power boost to your hand, which gives you an advantage over the opponent. Nothing is actually written on the cards that say they have this function. This is all coded within.
Okay, I'm growing a bit tired of this, of the thinking for today. Oh my god, it was just an hour and 20 minutes. Oh, Jesus. Jesus. Okay. I'm gonna try and maybe see this card, see this video, and maybe I'm gonna call it a day.
In the rules, and are a part of how the players use the cards within the game to interact. In trading card games, this rule-based interaction is also present, but it looks a little bit different. It looks something like this.
What the fuck?
The rules. For example, in Crazy 8, the card you play will then determine which card the opponent is able to play on their next turn. Meanwhile, in poker, players compare the power of their hands, but if you combine 2 cards of the same rank, you get a power boost to your hand, which gives you an advantage over the opponent. Nothing is actually written on the cards that say they have this function. This is all coded within the rules, and are a part of how the players use the cards within the game to interact. In trading card games, this rule-based interaction is also present, but it looks a little bit different. It looks something like this. There are card games out there that function just fine without direct rules-based interaction, like the deck-building game Dominion. So why is this an essential element within trading card games? The first big advantage this rules-based interaction system will bring in is that it is built on numbers, and just having numbers printed on cards is kind of exciting. Even if someone has no idea what a mana pool is, or a graveyard or a library, they can still see a big number and figure out that that shiny dragon is something powerful. Even the most experienced players will find it hard to argue that sometimes big number just feel good. Realistically, looking at a card's resource cost will probably give you a better idea of power, but it's hard for players to get excited looking at a price tag. More importantly, though, is that these rules provide a guaranteed window for interaction. Without interaction, games will essentially turn into just two players playing solitaire or racing to see who finishes first. This is even worse in trading card games because they have a huge card pool and a variety of strategies, which makes it very difficult to guess what kind of effect interaction is going to be effective against an unknown deck. Creatures and attack phases offer a standard of interaction, and because it's standard across the game, the tools of interaction, which in this case are creature cards in most games, can have a higher potential damage output than non-creature sources that are more difficult to interact with, because countering a creature is as simple as playing another creature while countering a non-creature is much more difficult, usually requiring a specific card effect. What this means is that a deck without creatures will be facing a stiff penalty, since they will have to compete with the superior damage output of opposing creatures by using non-creature damage sources that are, by design, weaker. In practice, what this does is it focuses interaction on this single standard card type, which means not only are players able to interact using these types of cards, but it also makes it much safer to include effect interaction that will target that specific.
I'm not understanding anything, and I'm gonna attribute that to the fact that I'm pretty tired. I started the stream pretty tired, so I think I'm gonna call it a day because it doesn't make sense to try and learn with like sleepy head, you know. Um, I'm gonna try start the stream a bit earlier tomorrow, like maybe 5 p.m. 5 p.m. probably. It's a bit better. So yeah, goodbye. Is it still